Eddie the Strangler was broke again. It seemed as though nothing could be done to relieve this condition of impecuniosity, except, of course, another job like the previous ones. After all, why work for a living? It was so easy for one to come silently through the window, approach the bed in stocking feet, and then quickly fasten one's long, steel-like fingers about the neck of the sleeper. To be sure, it required steady nerve, particularly during the short struggle that always ensued in the darkness. But there was little chance for one to fail if one took sufficient pains to get one's thumb in the proper position on the windpipe. Then, too, although becoming less so each succeeding time, it was still rather unpleasant to have to view the purplish-black face of the dead person after the job was completed, the tiny pocket light turned on, and the search for the valuables begun. However, one had to endure these little trials for the sake of the recompense, since always, if one did not take it upon oneself to endure them, loomed up the dread possibility of having to earn one's bread by manual labor. Thus reflected Eddie the Strangler as he leaned against the convenient lamp-post, with his hands sunk deep in his pockets and his hat pulled down over his forehead, waiting expectantly. Apprehensively his eyes glanced toward the clock, visible through the glass panel of the corner near beer saloon door. 11 p.m. She certainly ought to be along soon. It was here that he had first seen her, a number of evenings before, as she strode briskly home from some place or other. Finally she passed. Again Eddie looked her over critically. Not only the diamond hanging from each earlobe, but the rings on her hands as well, showed conclusively that she must possess other jewelry of value. Well, it might as well be tonight as any other time. No use of following her night after night. A half-block behind her Eddie fell in step. This would be the last time that he need trail her to the place where she lived. His previous shadowing had shown him that she invariably proceeded to a rear room on the first floor of a theatrical boarding house up near Washington Square. By making his way quickly around to the alley, after she closed the front door behind her, and watching her windows as she turned on the lights, he had learned that she lived alone. This pink and white girl would be an easy victim. The very first one of those that went before had been a woman. She had died with but a few impotent trusting motions of her soft white arms. The next three, though, had been men. They had required more skill, more coolness, especially that huge German ex-bartender out in Anglewood. However, one ought not to confine one's attention to the masculine sex alone. One should be more universal in one's calling. This handsome creature would help to even things up. As she ascended the front steps and shut the door behind her, Eddie shrugged his shoulders and laughed aloud. Long before this time tomorrow, the newspapers would be out with their glaring headlines reading, "The Strangler works again," and "Young woman found murdered in bed, valuables missing." And he, Eddie, the cause of the extra editions, would be laboriously figuring out the value of the haul at so much per carat in his tiny room in that great jungle, Chicago's West Side. Swiftly he departed for the alley where he secured a position of vantage between two ash cans and watched her while she entered the room, switched on the light, and drew down the shades. Then he waited patiently until he saw the light suddenly go out, the shades raised, and one window opened wide to admit the cool breeze from the lake. That, in itself, was locked. He had liked that phase of the situation from the very first moment, a week before, that he had begun to collect data on the coming affair. It obviated the necessity of bringing along a glass cutter and a cumbersome ball of putty. An hour passed. It must be the right time now. Before removing his shoes and climbing up on the fence that separated the two backyards, he exercised his fingers vigorously for a few minutes. One's fingers must not be stiff at the crucial moment. It required but a few seconds to climb from the fence to the sill and to step lightly in through the open window to the floor of the room. For a very short while he stood motionless, listening to the regular breathing of the sleeper. Then it was that he heard footsteps coming down the hall. Some fool, perhaps about to knock on the door, awaken the girl on the bed and ruin everything. Well, there was no need for everything to be ruined. With cat-like tread he crossed the floor to the opposite wall. Good, it was exactly what he had made it out to be in the semi-darkness, a square trunk. He raised the cover, and as he did so a tiny block of wood tumbled to the carpet. With his hand he groped within. Excellent. No tray, and empty as well. This would be a safe refuge while the fool outside should either knock or go on about his or her business. He stepped in with his right foot and followed with his left. Then he sunk to his knees and allowed the cover to drop slowly till an opening of only an inch in height remained. He listened. Rap, rap, rap came from the panel of the door. Then a voice exclaimed, "Estelle, may we come in a minute? Have you gone to bed yet?" No answer. "She is asleep," continued the voice to someone else. "We'd better not disturb her. It's late." The footsteps left the region of the door. Better to wait 2 or 3 minutes, thought Eddie, till everything's quiet again, before tackling the job. These fools might change their minds and come back. He let the heavy lid rest on his shoulders and altered his position a trifle. Click went the spring fastening on the trunk as the upper half of the mechanism came in contact with the lower half and locked the cover shut. "Oh, oh, God!" screamed Mademoiselle Estelle Comte, snake charmer at the Hippodrome, next morning as she went to examine her newest python, and found him coiled tightly around the neck of a little man whose face was unrecognizable on account of its purplish-black hue, its bulging eyeballs, and its protruding tongue.